All right, today we're going to dig into a single piece of law from Pakistan, the 27th Constitutional Amendment. Now, I know that sounds super technical, right? But stick with me because what it reveals about the mechanics of power and really the health of any democracy, well, that's a lesson that goes way beyond just one country. So let's get into it. So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. How do you dismantle a democracy legally? I mean, we usually picture democratic collapse as something really loud and violent, a military coup, a revolution in the streets. But what if it had happened quietly, through paperwork, procedures, using the very laws that were meant to protect the system in the first place? That's really the big question we're exploring here.
Okay, so our story really starts with the passing of this 27th Amendment. And on the surface, it did something that sounds, well, pretty simple. It created a brand new court. But the impact? Oh, that was anything but simple.
So this new body is called the Federal Constitutional Court, the FCC for short. And you might think, okay, another court, what's the big deal? But it's not just another court. The real story, the crucial part, is what this new court was given the power to do, and maybe more importantly, where that power came from.
And this is where you can really see that transfer of power in black and white. Before this amendment, it was the Supreme Court that handled all the big stuff, the most critical jobs. We're talking interpreting the Constitution, dealing with fundamental rights cases, settling these huge disputes between the federal government and the provinces. And after the amendment, boom, all of those core responsibilities, they're just handed over, lock, stock, and barrel, to this brand new FCC.
So think about it. What happens when a country's highest, most powerful court suddenly has its most important jobs taken away and given to a new body? Well, the answer is pretty straightforward, isn't it? It gets sidelined. And you have to understand, for decades, the Supreme Court of Pakistan was seen as the ultimate guardian of the Constitution. It was the one institution that was supposed to hold everyone accountable to the country's highest law, even the most powerful people in the government. And this wasn't just a theoretical role, not at all. You can see its real-world power right here. The Supreme Court was handling these landmark, super high-stakes political cases. Things like the Memogate controversy, the Panama Papers case, these had massive political fallout. This was a court that was a genuine, powerful check on the government.
So the takeaway here is absolutely crucial. Taking these powers away, it does so much more than just, reshuffle the judiciary's org chart. It actually fragments the country's legal authority. It weakens that whole idea of having one single final decider. And at the end of the day, it seriously diminishes one of the most important checks on government and executive power.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. Why do these kinds of institutional changes matter so much? It's because they strike right at the heart of a fundamental democratic idea, the rule of law.
And look, that's a fair question, right? I mean, they're both courts, they're both filled with judges, so why should we care which one gets to hold the gavel on big constitutional questions? Well, the answer to that is all about what the rule of law really means. When you boil it all down, the rule of law is this really simple, but also kind of radical idea that nobody is above the law. Not the government, not the army, not the richest person in the country. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is accountable to the same set of rules, and those rules have to be applied fairly.
Yeah, there was this political thinker, A.V. Dicey, who broke it down into three basic parts. First, you can't have arbitrary power, meaning rulers can't just wake up and do whatever they feel like. Second, everyone is equal in the eyes of the law. And third, and this is the one that's really key for what we're talking about today, is that you need independent courts to be the protectors of people's rights. And that third part, well, it absolutely requires a strong, truly independent judiciary.
This whole struggle to keep the courts independent from political power, it is not a new thing, not by a long shot. In fact, one of the most famous showdowns over this exact issue happened more than 400 years ago, and it was a battle between a king and his own top judge. So picture this. We're in 17th century England, and this was a time when the lines were getting really blurry and fiercely contested between the power of the king, the executive, and the power of the courts, the judiciary. You had King James I, and he was basically arguing, hey, I'm the king. I have a divine right to be the ultimate judge in any legal fight. He truly believed that the law flowed from him, so he should be able to decide any case however he wanted. But his own Chief Justice, a guy named Sir Edward Coke, stood up to him, and he delivered this legendary line. He said, "The king is under no man, but under God and the law." I mean, you have to realize how revolutionary that was. He was looking the most powerful person in the entire country in the eye and telling him, the law is above you.
And the lesson from that incredible confrontation became a cornerstone of modern democracy. It's simple. For the law to actually be fair, the courts have to be independent. They have to be shielded, insulated from the political whims of whoever happens to be in power. Okay, so let's bring all that history back to today. Because what the analysis here suggests is that the events in Pakistan, well, they might be part of a much broader and much more subtle pattern of how democracies can begin to erode in the modern world.
And this comparison really gets to the heart of it. You've got the abrupt rupture on one side. That's the obvious coup, the revolution. But then you have this incremental decline, which is so much quieter. It happens through totally valid-looking legal changes, things like constitutional amendments. Power isn't seized in a dramatic grab, it's just transferred, piece by piece by piece. And history gives us a pretty chilling example of this exact playbook from Europe between the world wars. You had all these democratic systems that were basically hollowed out from the inside. Leaders used constitutional amendments, often passed in the name of stability or national necessity, to legally dismantle the very checks and balances that were supposed to keep them in line.
And that brings us right back to where we started. The argument here is that Pakistan's 27th Amendment fits this pattern perfectly. The form of the Constitution is still there, right? You still have courts, you still have a Supreme Court, but the substance, its actual power to hold the government accountable, that has been seriously weakened.
And so all of this leaves us with a really fundamental question, and it's not just for Pakistan, it's for any democracy. What is a constitution actually for? Is it supposed to be a shield, protecting all of us from the misuse of power? Or can it be twisted into an instrument, a tool, that those in power can use to legally lock in their own authority? It's a heavy question, but it's one that's absolutely worth thinking about.